City of Santa Barbara Finance Committee meeting of April 22nd, 2009. I'm the chairman of the committee, Roger Horton. With me is Councilmember Falcone and Councilmember Schneider. Today's agenda really deals with the fiscal year 2010 recommended budget, and I understand that Mr. Samario will be handling that side of the presentation for the Finance Department. Mr. Samario, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Bob Samario, Assistant Finance Director. And as you know, today we'll be presenting to the City Council later this afternoon the recommended fiscal year 2010 budget. We're excited about that. It's been a long time coming for us, a lot of hard work, but we're happy to present it. In addition to an overview that Mr. Pearson will be giving later today, we'll also be including in today's council presentation a proposed review schedule over the next couple months or month and a half, during which each department will have a chance to present their budget to the full City Council. And as you know, each year we also bring to the Finance Committee a recommended or proposed review schedule for them, which includes topics relevant to the budget, such things as capital and fees and the like. And so the reason we're here today is to present to you our proposed or recommended committee review schedule for the next few weeks. And so if you don't mind, I go ahead and just turn your attention to either your agenda report or to the overhead. You'll see that we have 5 dates, that are scheduled. Sure. So the first scheduled meeting will be next Tuesday, the 28th. And during that meeting, we propose to present 3 topics. The first will be a look at general fund non-departmental revenues, the assumptions and the projections, not only for 2010, but also for 2009, when we started seeing the dramatic and significant decline in our revenues, particularly after September 2008. We'll also at that time be presenting to you a multi-year forecast, which is going to be, I think, interesting and important. And interesting because in light of the current economic environment, it'll be pretty challenging for us to be determining what the revenues are going to be doing over the next several years. And I think it'll be important for us to be able to see what those impacts are going to be and how we may be able to balance over the next several years. And then we'll also look at a review of the citywide reserves. So we've seen general fund reserves, of course, more recently, but we also want to show you, since it's been a while since we've done so, all the reserves for all funds. It's really the general fund and enterprise funds that have reserve balances.
Could I ask a question on that?
Of course.
Maybe we ask questions as we go along.
Sure, absolutely.
I know, for example, we have a reserve for vehicle replacement, among other things. Would that be a time when you would reflect that?
Mr. Chair, absolutely. That's when we'll cover those kinds of reserve balances. So then on Tuesday, May 5th, we will be presenting to the committee the capital program budget. And we will go over not only the details of next year's proposed capital program for all funds, but also bring to you the 6-year capital improvement plan that we do every other year. And so this time around, we'll be able to see the magnitude of the capital program over the next 6 years, what's unfunded and what we're proposing to be funded for next year.
On that one, this would be a time when the recommendations of the infrastructure task force committee could be married with this proposal, because there are some suggestions there on ways to look at the capital program down in the future.
Right.
So I'm hoping that we can integrate those 2 discussions at that point.
Sure, and to be honest, I hadn't contemplated that, but we can certainly do that.
Well, I'd like to do that because there's a lot of hours of effort put into that report, sure. And this is the time now when we can really start to make it pay off for us.
I agree.
Thanks.
And then following that, on Tuesday, May 12th, we will look at the general fund department revenues. Next Tuesday will be non-departmental. It's primarily taxes next Tuesday, but on the 12th, we'll be looking at the general fund departmental revenues, so their fees, any changes to the proposed fees. And we'll also be looking at any new revenues or enhancements that were included as part of their balancing strategy. As you know, each department was allocated a share of the cuts, if you will, for next year. And in some cases, they identified new revenues in order to balance it, so we'll be discussing those as well. On the 19th, we will then move on to the enterprise funds, so moving away from the general fund and looking at their revenues and proposed fees. And as you know, in some cases, they've been impacted as well by the economic environment or downturn, and so they've been adjusting fees to, at least in part, to help rebalance their budgets. And then the last item scheduled is for Tuesday, June 2nd, and it'll be really if needed. This is the time when we will bring to you any staff recommended adjustments. And those are typically things that, based on new information that we've learned since we filed the budget today, that come to our attention that necessitates some adjustment to the budget. And one example could be, for example, any concessions that are agreed to with labor groups where we now know what those dollar amounts might be. The budget now has just a placeholder of $1.5 million, and to the extent it comes in different than that or at all, we could be bringing that to you on that date. But again, that's only if necessary will we have any items on that date.
Since the document that we're going to be receiving, I think it's already up there, is a printed document, how current will the revenue projections be in the printed document? And is this a time when you would make further adjustments if your revenue looks different than what you have in the printed document?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't anticipate making any more changes to our revenue estimates for next year, at least before budget adoption. The kinds of adjustments we'd be bringing on that date would be more, again, new information, mostly on the expenditure side, but not looking to revise our revenue projections. The only thing we're going to be getting that's of substance, in addition to sort of the monthly TOT news, which you've seen the most recent data on, it will be on June 15th, 16th, we'll hear the next quarter's sales tax information. But prior to that, we don't anticipate any adjustments to revenues.
That was actually the reason I raised that question, because the TOT and the sales tax are moving in a negative direction pretty rapidly, and even the numbers that we talked about earlier in the quarter perhaps don't look as good right now. But in any event, this is not where you would be doing that at a later date in the new fiscal year, then?
No, it's not. It'll
Okay.
probably be, if we have to adjust it, we might be looking at mid-year next year as a potential date for adjusting those revenues. We do have a bit of a cushion, and we'll hear about that later today and maybe throughout the next few weeks, but we have an appropriate reserve that we've been able to establish as part of the next year's budget, recommended budget, that'll help to offset some of those potential revenue losses. But again, we don't anticipate making any more adjustments on things unless things just really fall, get really dramatic. We see 40% decreases in TOT instead of 21 or 22.
Yeah. Okay. Ms. Falcone?
Well, two things. One, on the scheduling. I was just going through my electronic device to match up these dates to make sure that they're on there, and I found that 3 out of the 5 were not yet. So if we could make sure that these Finance Committee special budget hearings and the subject matters get on our calendars, then because we've had between the council budget special meetings and these and so forth, and then changes to it, it gets a little confused, and sometimes things either don't get on or they don't get off, as the case may be. And so if we could just get really clear with the support staff, that would be helpful to all of us.
We will do.
That's a good point. Yeah, I notice on my calendar that I'm going to be out of town at a conference on the 12th. Does that coincide with one of yours? If it does, then we don't have a quorum.
No, I will be here, and so that
Okay.
that won't be an issue for me. I don't think. Anyway, but those sorts of things need to be coordinated, and I know it's very difficult to get everybody's schedule involved. But when something just sort of appears out of nowhere, and there are things that have been on any of our respective calendars for quite some time, it's more than just a little inconvenient and frustrating. So if we could get it clear early,
Sure.
that'd be helpful.
We'll
The other
do
thing
it.
has to do with the TOT. I noticed that through Jill's email the other day, I was in Sacramento, but I opened it up and it said, oh, well, February was down 21.8, so or 20.8, almost 21%. And I was hoping against hope that it would be at least leveling off. But no, Ms. Torres sent us a number of 24% down, which is no reflection on you, Jill. We love you. But yikes, I think was my response, or good grief, or something. So it's very disheartening. It's very tricky. My question is whether or not you, in your assessment of these numbers, has had an opportunity to do any kind of comparison to like-kind cities of, Laguna Niguel, Palm Springs, places that are tourist driven, visitor-driven TOT cities to see if there's any comparison.
Well, we haven't compiled hard data with comparisons against similar cities with us with the structure of our tourism and high-end retail. We do know that across the board, high-end retail is down. So we expect from the reports that we get showing by sector that it's down in, tourism and restaurants and the high-end retail, and so the similar cities we suspect are suffering as much, if not more, than us. So.
Well, I guess part of my question goes to Jim.
I have talked with some city managers, Anaheim, Laguna Beach, and what's interesting is in January and February, or when the economic crisis first hit, they were telling me they were down 20% when we were still only down 10, and I was feeling pretty good. And now it seems, but I was hearing a lot of 20% in those kinds of communities, which are visitor-based communities.
That's what I'm
so
interested in.
That 20% number was what they were talking about when I talked to them, and this was a month and a half ago or so. So, like I said, before we got hit with the really bad news, I was feeling pretty good. But now it looks like everybody's experiencing that. And I don't know if you've seen in Las Vegas. I think it's much worse. Over in Hawaii,
Las Vegas has been off for 6 months.
Hawaii's been off really bad.
Yeah.
So I think it's catching up with us. There also in March we did have. Last year Easter was in March. This year it's in April. So that may account for a little bit of that. But that 20% number is not inconsistent with what other similar visitor-based communities in California were doing.
Okay, well, it's my understanding, and just as Easter is concerned, that people tend to hunker down with their families, and so traveling isn't necessarily something that we look forward to. At least that's what I hear from the people who are either benefiting or not benefiting from the Easter travel. My inquiry goes to specifically relatively like-sized, relatively located beach community, if you will, destinations for visitors of all kinds, and whether or not, and those will be the Laguna Niguels, the Newport beaches, and some of the smaller communities maybe up north, that really have a solid base of transit occupancy tax, because that means people are either coming to visit or they're not. And sales tax is one thing. I mean, we can gauge that with other sorts of analyses, but to really get 5 or 6 very similar communities in their visitor draw analysis and a comparison with that would be very useful to me going forward in this whole budget analysis. So I'd really appreciate it if you could take a few minutes and collect that data and send it to us in email form or whatever. I just need to have a footing as to what else is going on out there in the tourism arena, because there are a number of factors, not just the economy, that are affecting us in particular. I'm interested in the TOT. I'm interested in the visitors coming or not. There's a lot of other things to analyze, but I'm interested in that slice of the pie.
On a related topic, in the sales tax, off the top of your head, Bob or Jill, do you know what percentage automobile sales are of the sales tax, just roughly? Could you could you get me that number?
Sure.
I don't need any specific details. I'm just interested in knowing. Ms. Schneider.
Thank you. I'm sure the Conference and Visitors Bureau would be able to help you with that data as well. I'm sure they're looking and comparing how this county compares to others. So instead of reinventing the wheel there, but that would be good information. The property tax increment was due April 10th, and I'm curious if we know now, or at least we'll know by May 12th when we look at the general fund revenues, if we'll have that information, if that's going to meet our projections, because that might help us in terms of next year's projections in property tax.
In terms of property tax, they prepare the assessed roll beforehand, so we pretty much know what we're going to get. And so while we don't have the
It's just the supplemental piece that we
just
don't
the supplemental. But
have. I guess that's the question. If by May 12th, will we have that?
we'll have that by May
By May
12th.
12th, okay.
Yeah, we should.
Okay. Do you have a further presentation? Committee, do you have any comments? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move we approve the proposed schedule.
Second.
Further discussion?
Made all my comments.
Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right. Mr. Pearson, that's it for today. Then meeting adjourned.